Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. Very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by Ian Cockbain, a former professional cricketer, a man who's had over 10 years, 12 seasons in the top flight of cricket, predominantly with Gloucestershire, played overseas, bit of a T20 specialist and knocked out over 7,000 runs in his career. Very warm welcome, Ian. Thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. Now, obviously, I always do that brief intro. I know there's far more depth to it, but we're here to talk predominantly about transition and what comes after the sport. That being said, it's always lovely to ask our guests, now that you've retired, now that that sporting chapter's closed, there'll be a million memories, but pull out one or two for us that bring a sense of pride now that you can look back on your professional cricketing career.
Yeah, so it's one of those things for me, and sort of following in my dad's footsteps of being a professional cricketer. He had a stint with Lancashire back in the day. So for me, it was, I guess, my proudest moment was sort of walking out onto the field for that first game and saying that I've become a professional cricketer. That was something that I dreamt of from a very young age, and watching my dad go through it as well. So
Fabulous.
For me to finally get that opportunity was really nice. And I guess then leading on to sort of a little bit further on in my career, sort of scoring my first class 100. I guess that's something that I look back on now and go, wow, what a great experience. And yeah, I was fortunate to get a couple. Got one more than my old man, which was
nice.
Again a nice little thing to have in terms of bragging rights. So
yeah,
so that was that's something I do look back on.
Yeah,
fondly.
I love it. And how did you find playing as an Englishman, going over and playing your trade in Australia? Is that where you went with the Big Bash League? Did you end up in Australia?
Yeah. So I played a lot of club cricket out in Australia
Right.
over the years. My wife's Australian. I met her out there in 2014 in Adelaide. So it was one of those. I had a couple of mates in Adelaide, and Daniel Worrell was a close friend of mine from Gloucestershire, and I was over there through COVID. They had a couple of COVID issues. I was in the country. He knew me. The head coach, Jason Gillespie at the time, knew of me from playing against each other in England. And yeah, sort of got the call up. And to go back to Adelaide to represent the Strikers was awesome, actually, just given the fact that I've got a bit of a close affiliation with Adelaide.
Yeah, love it. And a little bit more stick, a little bit more sledging as the Englishman out there, or not too bad?
Do you know what? It wasn't too bad. I lucky enough to play against a few mates who play for other Big Bash teams. So it was friendly banter, shall we say?
Yeah. Good man. No, I've always got to pause there, because once you start these sporting reminiscences, it's always fascinating to hear, and straight away the emotion comes through of, following in your dad's footsteps and that little bit of friendly family banter and stuff. So we'll pause that. We could keep talking about the cricket forever, but tell us about the transition out of professional cricket then, Ian. What brought that chapter to a close? Was it on your terms? What made you start to think, right, now's the time to retire? And then give us a little bit of an overview of what you've been doing since that retirement.
Yeah, so in terms of what I'm doing now is I've come into financial advising. So again, following in my dad's footsteps, I was quite lucky in the regard that he basically groomed me to come into this role for life after cricket. So for me, I was one of the lucky ones in terms of I had quite a clear path of what it was going to look like after cricket. I didn't know it was going to end when it did. It was sort of, let's say, forced retirement, shall we say?
Right.
So in terms of, once I knew cricket wasn't going to go any further, it just made the process a little bit easier for me to then transition into exams, qualifications, study. I could just then hit that all at once, and my personality is very much, if I'm in something, I'm all in.
Right.
So I found it tough to do the both in terms of playing and study. I just found myself not really taking stuff in when I was trying to study and still playing. So for me, having that clean break was quite nice, actually, and it allowed me to focus entirely on study and getting my qualifications to come into financial advising.
No, that makes sense. So just dive back into the forced retirement then, Ian. Was that just that there wasn't a new contract forthcoming? Is that the scenario you found yourself in, like so many athletes do?
Yeah, exactly. I've just come off the back of playing a big bash, went to Pakistan, won the 100. I had a bit of an iffy year, my last year at Gloucester in 2020s. Given my age, I was 35 at the time. It made that an easier decision from Gloucestershire's point of view, I guess.
Yes.
They didn't offer me a new contract. They wanted to go down a different route in terms of trying to expose the youngsters. And then I had a bit of a search around with my agents in terms of trying to get a 2020 gig somewhere. I wasn't interested in doing a full season. I didn't
Hmm.
want to go back into up in the family, moving to a new place, diving into 4-day cricket, potentially looking at second team cricket. That just wasn't on my radar. I was happy to go and commute to go play a 2020 block for somebody, essentially as they're overseas, right?
Yes.
As a local. That opportunity didn't arise. So then that was made. That was okay. Happily take a clean cut from cricket.
No, that makes sense, and it's a scenario so many people find themselves in. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ian, but you mentioned earlier you had a plan. Your dad had developed this path. I think he built the business originally, didn't he? So you had a good insight as to what that might look like. Do you think that made your transition that bit easier? Because we speak to a lot of athletes that perhaps the contract's not forthcoming. They don't really want to relocate the family, as you alluded to, but they end up doing it because they need to pay the bills. They're not quite sure what they're doing, and so they bounce around a bit. The level of fulfillment's falling, but they're trying to do what they know to support the family. Whereas because you had a plan, were you able to be a bit more decisive, do you think, with the benefit of hindsight and say, do you know what, now's the time, I know where I want to be, let's start that chapter?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I was very clear on what I wanted. I didn't know when, but when I knew it was the time, I was like, right, okay, bang. That's my cue to now make that transition.
Yes.
Um, from a financial point of view as well, this is where I see a huge gap in education for sports people. I was lucky. I knew it was coming. I planned for it. So I had a safety net there to allow
Yes.
me to study. I basically had 2 years of not picking up a paycheck, but I knew it was coming. So I was in a fortunate position to say, actually, I didn't need to rush into making a snap decision. What I find with a few of my friends of the time comes, they don't, they've got no contract anymore. They don't really know what they want to do, but the income stops. They've got no safety net, and then they just go, well, what do I know? I know
Yes.
cricket. I'm just going to go coach. And then 2, 3, 4 years down the track, they're still coaching. It's not what they really want to do, but they've had to do it to support their family.
Yeah,
And
no,
this is
and
where,
you've mapped out there, Ian. There'll be plenty of people listening, nodding, and saying, "Well, that's me." And that's not us being nasty to people. It's an issue outside of sport as well. I've a few friends in your sector, and they often ask people, "How much do you have tucked away? How much savings do you have? How many months could you go without a paycheck?" And it's in many cases 1, 2, 3. So not having that safety net forces you into decisions, but from a sporting context, is it a first statement in your experience in cricket that everybody knows the pitfalls, but sort of naively believes it won't happen to them? So in sport, injuries can happen at any point. It can bring a career to an end. Form can go. Contracts can not be offered. So it's one of the most precarious environments you can be in for sort of long-term stability. But your situation you've alluded to, that we see that time and time again, that people are not building a plan. They have to step out of sport straight into the next thing because very few sports pay Premiership football wages. So,
exactly.
was that an issue in cricket, and is it still an issue? Do you think that people need to be a bit more ruthless in how they plan, and particularly from a financial management perspective?
Without a doubt, it's like I said earlier, it's a massive gap that I see from coming through the system in terms of my 12 years at Gloucester. We never had any financial education. The PCA are fantastic in terms of providing opportunities to get qualifications to go into a different career,
Yep.
but there's no talk about what that cost is.
Yep.
it's go to university, do your exams while you're still playing, etc., etc. But especially for the youngsters, an injury goes, they think they're going to play for the next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
All of a
Yeah.
sudden, it's taken away from them, and they're like, "Well, what do I do now?" And they haven't been exposed to putting a plan in place because nobody talks about finances. I guess it's maybe still classed as a bit of a taboo subject.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I was lucky; I was exposed to it. So for me, talking about finances is a very open thing.
Yes.
And that was just the way I was brought up. Some people are extremely nervous about talking about finances, especially their own.
Yep.
And it's not scary. It's not, it is a personal thing to an extent. But if you're talking to the right people about it, it becomes less scary, and you eventually get a plan in place, and it gives you that peace of mind to know that if the worst were to happen, I'm going to be all right.
Yeah. 100%. And I think it is still a taboo subject. Societally, it is still a taboo subject. And it requires people that have walked the path ahead of you. I always have this phrase that, accelerate your learning, look at the people that have walked ahead of you. And I remember when I signed at Newcastle Falcons, there was a raft of superstar players there. It was a different era, pre-salary caps, and John Hall had gone out and signed a who's who of rugby, one of which the captain, Doddy Weir, was a wonderful man who sadly passed away recently. But one of the first things he talked about was a pension, and introduced me to his advisor. And it's not something you're thinking about when you're 19, 20, but he recommended the sense in it. And it was those first steps into a complete unknown. So I think that's why I'm interested in your perspective in cricket. I think it's an issue in a lot of areas. We all hope it'll go on forever, and we all think we've got lots of time to make that plan. So you drifted into one of the areas we always say, Ian, with the benefit of hindsight, we're always geniuses. We can all look back and say, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. You've
Yeah.
alluded to a great answer there, and do start to build a financial plan. But I'll throw the question at you nonetheless, because I'm interested in what comes to mind. What are a couple of do's or don'ts from your perspective? Now you've stepped out of cricket, if you were talking to those, in all sports, but particularly in cricket, they're still there, they're still plying the trade. If you were saying, well, think about this, do this, don't do that, because it's going to make your transition out of elite sport that bit easier. What
Yeah.
comes to mind on that, Ian?
So the first port of call is, the PCA scheme, the pension scheme through the PCA and the ECB is actually quite a good one. You get 15% of your salary goes into your pension, but that's not it. It goes into the pot. It goes into the default funds and what have you, which is not appropriate for somebody, between 15, 16, 17, all the way through to 35, 40, whatever it is. It's you've still got such a long time, so it needs to be invested in an appropriate way for your stage of life,
Right.
not just in the pot with everybody else. That's the first protocol, because it's going in there anyway, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of money coming into cricket now, obviously with the Indian IPL owners purchasing the 100 teams. So if you get on that franchise bandwagon, you're getting big paydays, right? How do you best use that money in the most efficient way?
Yep.
All of a sudden, quite more often than not, you get a big chunk comes in, it takes you into a different tax band. Are you aware of what tax band you're in? Are you aware of the 60% tax trap of as soon as you earn over 100,000?
Yep.
Are you aware of that? Most people aren't. And then all of a sudden, the end of the year comes and they get slapped with a massive tax bill, and they're like, "Well, hang on a minute,
Yeah.
that's not what it's all cracked up to be."
Yeah, exactly. Where'd this go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they've already spent it.
Yeah.
So it's a case of going, if you do get a big influx of money, it's right. Can you be efficient? Can you get more money going into your pension? If you want access to that money for the house deposit or a safety net for that transition out of sport, are you utilizing ISA allowances, for example? There's a lot of different products that we can use to ease the pain of the transition. So I was lucky; I had a testimonial year at Gloucester, and again, I basically didn't touch that money. That money just went straight into an investment because I knew I needed it to cover me for those months or years, as it turned out, of the transition.
Yes.
So I like I say, I planned for it, but I was lucky that I got a testimonial year. And that was exactly what it was used for. It allowed me to retrain.
No, I love that, and I think so that on the do side, there's some fabulous advice there that everybody should heed. What about on the don't side? Ian? Is there anything that you look back and go, do you know what? Actually, now if I had my time again, talking to my younger self, I'd say don't do that.
Yeah, definitely.
There's probably a lot of things, but for the
there's a lot of
podcast, let's
things.
make it. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's keep it about
maybe just
transition.
keep
Yeah,
it. No, it definitely. It's you know, if you do get a big influx in pay, it's not falling into the trap of your lifestyle then matches that pay.
yeah,
You still need to live within your means. You can't be reliant on these lump sums coming in from franchise gigs because they're not always going to be there. It also takes this one bad tournament, and then all of a sudden you're off that merry-go-round,
yeah,
and then you're back to your domestic contract. It's fine if your lifestyle hasn't jumped with those paychecks.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
about it's making sure that you're conscious of actually treating the franchise gigs as a bonus rather than a guarantee.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's well said. It's great advice. So I like your story and your journey, Ian, because a lot of people, we often advocate, hey, invest in yourself, explore education, etc. And as you very articulately said, that wasn't necessarily landing for you, but you created the freedom to be able to give yourself that buffer, which is very brave because a lot of people, I've got to get out, but you knew what you were doing, you were planning, you were working towards something. One of the things we often say to people about identity, people really struggle with identity when they stop. I'm just curious whether that impacted you at all, because this notion of having such a robust plan, I know where I'm going, I'm now going to do my education, my qualifications, I know my exact destination. I don't want to presume here, but did that sort of almost remove this identity wrestle because you'd close the door on cricket and you'd open the door on this next chapter? Or did you also struggle a little bit with, I'm not the professional cricketer anymore?
Yeah, I did struggle with it, and I knew it was coming to an end, and I prepared for it. But you can't prepare for something
That
that
you've never
is it's
experienced.
been
Yeah.
yeah it's been such a big part of my life, of being a cricketer. And even before I played for Gloucester, I had 2 years on the MCC Young Cricketers, and I was playing for Lancashire second team and on their academy. So I was treated like a professional probably
Right.
from when I was 18.
Yes.
So in terms of not officially a professional, but I probably had 16, 17, 18 years of being treated as a professional. Um, when I finished cricket and went into study, I was quite meticulous with my study, and I had a set routine, and I think that helped going from having my structure of training,
Yeah.
travel, play, everything was in its box. So then I just transferred that straight into my study. So I kept that structure of right. I've got set hours where I'm going to study. I've got my set times for breaks. I've got this. So that was quite meticulous when it came to my study. Coming outside of the other end of being qualified, being a financial advisor, managing my own diary, that was when it got probably more tricky for me. I'd lost the routine of set hours or what have you.
Hmm.
It was up to me. I was left to my own devices to manage my own diary, to book in meetings, see clients. So that was an interesting one for me. So I don't know whether you want to call it.
It's great advice. The structure helped during that initial stage because I think every athlete listening knows they've got you can't just freestyle. There's certain team sessions, skill sessions, video analysis, conditioning, whatever it is. You live a structured life. So to maintain that structure in some capacities is great advice. Is there anything else that you look back and go, well, once you stepped in out of the qualifications and actually into work, is there anything else that you'd say, well, that looking back helped me transition through that, not identity crisis, but that identity challenge?
Yeah, so a big one I keep using it. I'm sure it's everyone uses the imposter syndrome, right? That was huge for me.
Right.
Huge. Coming out being qualified, yes, I am a financial advisor, but am I really? I didn't see myself as a financial advisor initially. It took me a good probably 6 months to really start to feel comfortable with sitting in front of clients and actually passing on my knowledge to them. I was like, well, what do I know? I've only been doing this for a couple of months or whatever the case may be. So that took me a little while to make that transition. I've tried to keep a structure of right. Okay, I've got my half an hour prep leading into a meeting. I've got my meeting. and then I've got half an hour after my meeting to sort of have a bit of a debrief, tidy up my notes. If I need to action any points, then I can action them. So I've tried to keep that structure.
Yeah.
I'm still not great at it. That's still a massive working point for me of going, actually, how do I construct a week? What is my weekly structure? And
Yeah.
trying to keep that consistent. I'm
Yeah.
still a little bit scattergun when it comes to, right, am I going to use Monday for an admin day, for example, and then am I going to get all my meetings booked in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Yeah.
Am I going to use Friday as a debrief? I'm still a little bit all over, but again, that is very much client dependent on availability and time slots and what have you. So yeah, it's probably learning to be less structured and being happy with that.
Yeah, all makes sense. And funny because obviously we have so many conversations with clients, and I, working coaching with business leaders in another business as well. Imposter syndrome is universal. It's one of those funny things. We talk about taboo subjects. I don't think anybody steps into an environment and doesn't feel a bit uncomfortable. I know you've been around cricket your whole life, but the first time you stepped out Lancashire second team, first time you stepped out for Gloucester, there's a discomfort when that ball comes flying past your head, and it's always a discomfort, but it becomes more manageable 15, 16 years on. It's the same in every chapter. If we didn't feel uncomfortable, we're not growing. So I think it's important to always reframe not what you don't do, but what you do. And probably one of your big advantages is you can talk to any elite sportsman or woman and say, well, I've been where you are. I understand the pressures. I understand the nature of contracts and the fragility of that, and they can stop at any time. There's so much empathy and rapport that can be built that a lot of people would never have, but you're focusing on, I've only been actually qualified for 6 months. It's funny where our brain takes us, isn't it? So I think it's always focus on what you can do. And I think also the actual structure of our diary, whether you're an ex-sportsman or woman or not, is a universal moving feast. Because I think, especially when you work for yourself, you're constantly testing and experimenting what works for you. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Because some people say, I should be doing it like this. Says who? It's a bit like health and fitness. You might train, look after yourself differently to your wife, to me, to my wife. So yeah, staying fluid. I think it's all great advice on there, Ian. So just a little bit of a quick fire, because I know you're pressed on time today, and I really appreciate the time you're giving us. Couple of things we always ask guests, because it always just gives an interesting snapshot into people's thoughts, psyche, perspective, call it what you will. So if I was to challenge you and say, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Might be sport related, life related, business, it doesn't matter. But is there a particular gem, a little bit of wisdom that you'd share on that one?
I guess it's just being accountable for your own actions, right? It's very easy to pass the blame, whereas I feel like if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. If you can own it and be accountable, it puts you in a far better position moving forward than pointing fingers.
Well said. No, love that. Favorite book or a book you'd recommend? You hopefully were out in the middle more often than you were sitting on the sidelines, but you'll have had a bit of dead time around the career. Did you ever pick up anything that really resonated with you?
Yeah, I'm not a massive reader, to be honest, but I did. I was having a long old trip somewhere, so I picked up a Ricky Ponting book.
Right.
So yeah, I read that cover to cover, and to be honest, I couldn't put it down. It was brilliant, just listening to the insights of Ricky Ponting as a skipper, as a leader, and how he sort of positioned his career and his thought processes and what made him so great.
Nice. No, I've not read that. I might be only asking this for me, but no, in all seriousness, we get a lot of great feedback on the books, but pretty much every recommendation I go off and get, I haven't read that, so I'll go and get that one. Next one's a bit of fun, Ian. Yeah, I will. I'll let you know what I think. Now, in terms of, it's a classic question, but it's still intriguing. It always makes me smile. So you're having a dinner party. You can bring 3 people along. Who's coming to make it an entertaining night and a bit of good banter, etc.? You've got special powers, so they can be dead or alive, but who's on the guest list?
Guest list, I'd probably go Shane Warne.
Yeah, nice.
From the cricket, I'm sure he's got a few stories.
Absolutely.
Again, a few more stories, Tiger Woods.
Yep.
And then one more. Jeepers, this is a tough one. I don't know who else do I enjoy. David Beckham, I'd probably go.
Nice. It's a good guest list, and Shane Warne, he's popped up on a few guest lists, as has Tiger Woods. So we might get like a universal pass with them. But no, that's a great guest list. It's a great guest list. Now, in terms of people finding you? Obviously, you've got a wealth of experience of, pardon the pun, transitioning out. You've got the specialisms around finance, etc. There'll be a lot of people listening to this, Ian, that are like, oh, I might like to reach out to him and touch base. Where's the best place to find you? Would it be LinkedIn, for instance?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, Instagram, directly through my email as well. So yeah, probably LinkedIn's probably the easiest from a work perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, just Ian Cockbain on LinkedIn. So part of St James's Place, Cockbain and Associates is the practice that I'm currently in.
Perfect. No, we'll make sure we put that all in the show notes. And then we always like to just prompt with this final one. Is there anybody that you know of in your network, Ian, that's transitioned out of sport? Doesn't have to be a cricketer, could be any, male, female, any discipline, that you think it might be worth us approaching and inviting onto the podcast to have a little bit of a chat about their story of transition?
Oh, that's a great one. I've got a lot
if you
of
can get Ricky
who...
Ponting on, that'd be great.
that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. Oh, jeepers! I might have to get back to you on that one.
No problem.
I'll rack my brains and have a think.
Yeah. Good man.
Yeah, there's not one that just pops into the top of my brain straight away. But
no problem. We'll have a little think, because we all know referrals are the best form of introduction in everything in life, isn't it? Whether it's sending people to your door for financial advice, restaurants, movies, whatever it may be. We all love a recommendation, and we've had some great ones from previous guests. So, Ian, I know it's a bit of a whistle stop today. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your advice. I love the slightly different route you've taken, that ability to build a plan, build that financial buffer, invest in your education, know where you want to be, but don't feel rushed to get there. I think that's a really inspirational takeaway for me, for anybody listening to this, to say, oh, actually, what's my plan? How big's my buffer? And do I have clarity about what I want to do? And obviously, if anybody wants to explore that further, well, they'll be able to reach out via the contact details in the show notes and reach out to you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, get in touch if anyone's got any ideas.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Ian. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome, mate.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insight, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.